Dear guests, let us welcome on stage Mr. Manmeet Singh, Chief Financial and Investment Officer at EMURGO, Singapore. Mr. Manmeet Singh.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Big thank you for you all being here to listen to what we have to share. And thank you to the BLOCKWALKS team for this invitation. So I represent EMURGO, and I'm going to give you a little perspective of some of the activities that we have been doing in terms of deploying blockchain and increasing adoption in the public and private sectors. Right, so we're going to talk about I'm going to share three sort of initiatives. One is in regards to fostering innovation through our accelerator. Another one is through our education initiatives. And the last one is some direct government initiatives that we are engaged with. So who are we? EMURGO is the commercial and venture arm of Cardano. And we have two primary objectives. So the first objective for us is to drive the adoption of blockchain, and of course, specifically our own protocol. But in addition to that, the other objective is to drive value to our token holders, ADA being the name of our token. So let me talk about the fostering of innovation side of things. So we have an accelerator program, which is a joint partnership between us at EMURGO and SOSV. SOSV is I think currently around a $650 million fund that focuses exclusively on accelerators. They've been doing this for many, many years. We know them very well for close to a decade now. And so our partnership with them is to create an accelerator, which is now based out in New York, where we will invest in 10 to 12 companies a year, twice a year, and run two separate batches of 3-month programs. So 5 or 6 companies for each batch. We invite applications from across the globe. We actually invest a significant amount of cash into the companies, each one of them, plus have them come over to our offices for 3 months, where we really work with them on, depending on what stage they come in, but we work with them on sort of figuring out precisely what's a good product market fit, to get some proof of concepts out there, engage in some pilots, and then help them scale and gain traction so that in the 3-month time frame, they're ready to move on to the next stage. So I'll give you a couple of examples of 2 projects that we invested in our first batch, which already graduated. We just started our second batch, I think, a week or 10 days ago. So one is HelixWorks. HelixWorks is an interesting company, and the reason we found it quite an attractive narrative for investment and an entity that we want to support is because they have a DNA-based tracking system. So how this works is, if you have a supply chain, products and goods, there's a lot of these questions regarding provenance and authenticity and so on, which a lot of people, I'm guessing if all of you are blockchain enthusiasts, you're aware of this scenario, but a lot of people talk about using blockchain for provenance, for authenticity. Well, a lot of times these fall down to solutions that are QR code based or RFID based or something of that nature, which comes with its own complexities. These guys have a very interesting solution where they actually have a DNA based well, it could come in different forms, but let's say a DNA-based spray that you can actually spray onto your product, and then there are ways of tracking and verifying that this is actually an authentic product and where it came from. And then you take that data, plop it onto a blockchain, and now you have both the benefits of having the data authenticating the product through its supply chain, through its value chain, and at the same time, you have a very unique fingerprint, DNA-based tracer that is very, very hard to replicate. And now we're already engaged in certain industries with a few companies to actually implement this at sizable scale. Another one is a company called Sempo. So given again, the sort of immutability nature of blockchain and the fact that it provides you that security and that transparency to transactions, one of the most often quoted use cases is in philanthropy and charity. So how do we ensure that all the funds that we send in to charities or in case of natural disasters and humanitarian crises, when we all, through the goodness of our hearts or whatever it is, open up our wallets and we send tons of cash, how do we ensure that this is actually going for the exact purpose that it was meant to, and there isn't a lot of, for lack of a better word, slippage and so on. To give an example of the extent of a problem like this in one of the world's largest economies, there was a few years ago a case where the supposed general manager of the Red Cross was caught on Instagram and other social media posts, posing next to, I think it was Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Hermes Birkin bags and so on and so forth. And the question is, how does somebody who's the general manager of the Red Cross have the kind of cash to do this? Long story short, investigations led to a whole lot of issues, and then there was a huge sort of turnover in the employee base of the organization. But if this could happen to an institution like the Red Cross, then this could happen anywhere. And what Sempo does is quite interesting, because it's not just about tracing the money, the donations coming from any of us to the platform. It's about also ensuring that in the case of humanitarian crises, where you have refugees, for instance, we don't have an ID system for them. So you have a simple app, a simple wallet that also allows for the creation of a ID for each one of these beneficiaries. So you have now an ecosystem where the beneficiaries are on the platform, everything on a layer of blockchain. You have the vendors who are providing relief goods and services or whatever also on that same blockchain, and you have the management that's doing the distribution also on that same platform. You build this using stable coins, for instance, so you create a little parallel economy where the charitable endeavor is being performed end-to-end, not just one segment of it, but end-to-end on an immutable, trusted, secure platform. Then that little stable coin can then, for the vendors, can go through a very simple process in that jurisdiction for converting into physical cash if that's what they need. But initiatives like this would then in turn sort of seed the idea that one can build at least microeconomic ecosystems that run entirely on a tokenized blockchain secured payment system. Not just focusing on our own initiatives, but we are very happy to partner and focus with other of our friends in the global industry to support their ventures. So Binance Charity, for instance, recently had this initiative. It's really awesome. Africa, young girls, menstruation, right? They don't have simple things like sanitary pads. And the sort of social stigma and problems that this causes to millions of young girls across Africa is absolutely profound. So Binance now in this case found a solution where if I recall correctly, it was under $5, I think $4.8 for a year's supply of sanitary pads for a young girl child in Africa. Now, this entire platform that they're running, this entire charitable initiative, is implemented fully on blockchain. You can go see who donated, how much, where it went, who was the vendor, who received how much in this entire chain. Absolutely transparent. So these are the sort of, public sector, public good initiatives that we're very happy to support as well. All right, let me come to the second point. So we're talking about education. So here there's a sort of somewhat different philosophy that we have in the back of our heads, and it goes like this. One of the biggest problems that we have in our industry is adoption, right? We can talk all about it. We can talk about all the pilots that, the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 are doing, all the government initiatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reality of the matter is we don't have critical scale yet. There are very few initiatives, you can possibly count them on your hand, where you have a blockchain-based solution being used at a critical scale level today, right? Outside of the payment side of the story, right? So one of the reasons for that is, well, we talk about many reasons, but one of the critical reasons for that is this. Do you know how much it costs to hire a blockchain engineer of reasonable quality? We're talking about $100, $150, $200, $300,000. You cannot build an at-scale deployment on any technology with 5 superstar engineers that are going to change an entire industry. You need the 5 superstar engineers who are the brains, create all this wonderful stuff, create the architecture of the program, but then you need an army of engineers that are there to implement, to deploy, to service, to maintain, et cetera, et cetera. So that does not exist today. So we have, we recognize that problem on the one hand. On the other hand, we have a public problem in several countries. So I don't know if you're aware, but I can, so give you this case study here. So when we talk about the IT industry and IT outsourcing industry in particular, India is one nation where I'm from that comes top of mind. But I don't know if you're aware, we have a major crisis in India. We've got engineering universities being shut down, hundreds of engineering universities being shut down, substandard education. And this isn't just an issue in India, it's an issue across our education sector, which isn't keeping pace with the developments of what the industry requires, what the recruiters and the employers require. That talent gap is profound. At the same time, as we are accelerating at an exponential pace in terms of technological development and ambition and projects and so on, the talent pool, even the one that's experienced, is not keeping pace. So we have millions of engineers globally in this large IT outsourcing industry, for instance, whose predominant training has been in things like Java and .NET, becoming increasingly redundant, becoming a lot of these IT companies are facing a lot of problems in growth and scale, so they've had to lay off engineers. So not only now you have a scenario where your youth at the university level is facing a problem getting employed, but your existing workforce, massive and talented as it is, doesn't have the right skill sets to actually grow the industries that you're counting on to grow your ecosystem. So our education program then is based on sort of 3 different segments. So one is we partner with universities and we're bringing blockchain education, hardcore coding blockchain education to universities, to the computer science classes. This year or in the next 10, 12 months, I think we will be training somewhere around 4,000 students at the college level. We have a separate program that focuses on experienced talent. So the engineers out there who have 2 to 8 years of experience and wish to reskill and upskill, we have specific programs training for them. And we have a third one that says, okay, fine, now we've got a large organization somewhere, an IT organization, a bank, an FMCG company, whatever. Anybody who's looking at deploying en masse, at scale, blockchain-based solutions, they need to reskill, upskill their team, their engineering team, and so we can provide customized training solutions for that. And this initiative, although, there's a critical element, of course, in terms of giving education about Cardano and our own protocol, our focus on this initiative is to also provide education across other prominent protocols that are prevalent in the enterprise space. Because it's about meeting the demand of talent by the supply of talent and bridging that gap. And that demand and the qualities, the skill sets that the demand requires are not driven by my personal viewpoints, they're driven by the industry. So we're trying to match that. So that's the education side of things that we're doing. In terms of national governments, so I'll give you 2 examples where we're working very actively right now. So with one economy, it's a developing economy, and they have a huge issue of, unbanked population. So something around half of their population is unbanked, does not have access to financial services, is not part of the financial inclusion market, and so on and so forth. So taking a leaf from some of the development that we've seen in Asian countries or in African countries, where they went through this sort of technological leapfrog approach where don't have access to internet to have access to internet via smartphones and 4G networks and so on and so forth, right? Bypassing this entire desktop era and so on. So taking a cue from that level of leapfrogged developmental growth, we're working with the government to deploy an entire financial services ecosystem, which includes a blockchain-powered banking system. It includes exchange mechanisms, and then within this, it includes all these services in terms of lending, sort of crypto lending and creating assets, tokenized assets, providing accounts that are simple and easy to manage through a simple app on the phone, because this population, unbanked as it is on mobile, is on the internet, is comfortable using apps and so on and so forth, but they haven't had the ability to open bank accounts. So we're trying to essentially sort of do this experiment to sort of leapfrog the financial services industry in this nation through a entirely blockchain-powered one. And one of the, I think, critical things of why we think we're going to be successful here is this. All these initiatives at scale in this sort of level, at this sort of impact, require political will, which is one of the things that we're lacking across the industry in terms of regulations and legislations that are pro-blockchain and enable this at-scale adoption. There also includes in this an entire system for a security token exchange. We are, within the US, within Europe, major economies, we're still arguing, debating, trying to figure out what kind of rules and regulations we should have for digital assets, what kind of security token exchanges we should have, what the hell is a security, what is a utility, what's a tokenized asset. All these discussions, debates, and sandboxes, as the previous speaker mentioned, are being created to sort of figure this out. Certain forward-looking governments are leapfrogging that as well and saying, look, I don't have anything. I like this notion. Let's just build it out and see how it goes. And I think those sort of forward-thinking political will leaders would be the ones that would drive this next phase of our growth. This is my last example. I got 3 minutes left, good. So this is a top 10 global economy. And the problem that they have is this. They have a major issue with inflation. A large part of the inflation is driven by commodity prices. Now, the ministry and the minister and so on, who are in charge of managing inflation through management of commodity price indices and the commodity markets, have an issue where they don't have information. They don't know which commodity, how much, sold when, to whom, when was delivery, when was the transaction. They don't have a clear sense of it. So by the time they get signals that, let's say, there is a lack of supply in the market, by the time they get the signals, that action has already happened, and the market forces themselves have probably engineered responses to that market action, and now the minister is taking a step to increase supply and then ends up in a scenario where you have an oversupply of that commodity. So now you're swinging the index further down. So you have these wild swings, which are coming purely from a lack of information, fragmented markets, certainly a huge problem with bad actors in the ecosystem that are manipulating the markets. So what we're doing is building an entire solution that says, okay, first, we answer the supply chain side of things. So how do we track the supply chain of specific commodities? Let's talk about the commodities that are the most, say, easy to build onto a blockchain-powered supply chain tracking system. And then, once you're able to actually see the commodity as it flows through its value chain, without centralizing the market. You're not saying that the government is going to take over this entire function. It's still private enterprise that's running it, but now there is greater transparency and visibility on what's happening. And then after that, if you have that, then the next step is that the market mechanism that you have for the trading of this commodity comes onto something of a security token exchange platform. Now with this, the government doesn't need to physically be the one playing this commodity game, but they now have sight, transparency, and security of the information that they're getting in real time. So this is an initiative that we're very deeply involved in as well. And again, once these sorts of at-scale deployments start showing results, it also starts changing that much needed political will that we're lacking, because now you have genuine results to show and say, look, blockchain is good for this in particular, and it's helping here, and here are the numbers that prove it. Right, 3 seconds, I'm on time. That's all I have for you. Thank you all very much, and I'm around if you want to talk later. Thank you.